Now we will go through the administrative portion of this presentation. So the requirements for inspectors are outlined in the statutes, the legal requirements that are contained in the California Education Code in section 17311A and 81143. And these are summarized and paraphrased here in these next bullets. The school district shall provide for and require competent, adequate, and continuous inspection. The inspector must be satisfactory to the architect or structural engineer and to DGS. The inspector is responsible to the governing board for employment purposes, and the inspector is responsible to DGS for the enforcement of plans and specifications. So as you can tell with the bullet legend, there's nothing new here. The design professionals are involved with providing the approval, as is the school district, and then DSA is involved as well. There's requirements for us as DSA in the Education Code, in which in order to ensure competency and adequacy of the inspectors, DGS or DSA needs to provide training, such as this one, for inspectors about the applicable rules, regulations, and standards that apply to school construction. And we're also required to evaluate and re-evaluate inspector competency, such as meeting continuing education and training requirements, such as this class. And this is to occur no later than 48 months after the last evaluation and re-evaluation of your certification. Providing some background on the dates of effectiveness for the 2019 codes. So for parts 1 through 12, based upon when they were published and when they become effective, this timeline gives some information about that. So the first date of publication is July 1st, 2019, and that's when parts 1 through 12 are provided and published. The codes need to be available for purchase and use by the public, and they become effective January 1st, 2020, and that is correct for the parts 1 through 12, with the exception of part 1, which is the administrative code, which becomes effective 30 days after filing with the Secretary of State. So the 2019 administrative code became effective in January of 2019. Continuing on with the publication and effectiveness for parts 1 through 12. So for those projects that have been submitted to us on or after January 1st of 2020, those must be designed and constructed in accordance with the 2019 edition of the building codes. And Title 24 Code Edition that's indicated on the cover sheet of the DSA approved construction plans is the one that will be effective. You may see during the course of your inspection some projects that are still in accordance with the 2016 version, depending upon when the project was initially submitted versus when the 2019 was effective. So you as project inspectors need to follow the requirements as prescribed on the DSA approved construction documents, and those include the stamped plans and project specifications. Now moving on to the administrative code, and the regulations flow from the law. So in this section of the Administrative Code 4-332A, a project inspector shall notify DSA when construction is suspended for more than 1 month. And in 433B1, an inspector shall not have a current employment relationship with any entity which is a contracting party for the construction or any entity providing services for the school district. That's the school district, not just for a given project, that's the entire school district, except for services directly related to project inspection. And the reason for this last one is due to the concerns for a conflict of interest. Continuing on, for each individual project, DSA approval is required for any project inspectors and assistant inspectors on a given project. And in order to obtain that DSA approval, the inspectors must establish to DSA's satisfaction that they are appropriately certified by DSA, has adequate knowledge and experience to perform the required duties associated with that particular project, and will provide sufficient time on that project to meet all of the required inspection responsibilities, including the one required for continuous inspection. And keep in mind that DSA's approval can hinge upon whether or not the PI can demonstrate that they will be present to provide that continuous inspection in accordance with the CAC, Section 4-342B1. We may require some justification from inspectors that identify what their workload is during the course of a project to verify that time will be provided adequately for that. The approval from DSA is provided through the DSA-5 PI or DSA-5 AI forms. There's additional information about these requirements in IRA-7. In the Administrative Code 4-333B6, it notes that an approved inspector may be replaced in accordance with the processes outlined in Section 4-341D, and the school district must ensure that the replacement inspector is provided prior to continuing construction work on that project. DSA may withhold approval of the replacement inspector until a verified report by the previous project inspector is provided to us in accordance with the noted code section there, 4-336C5. Continuing on, 4-333B7, DSA may withdraw the inspector's approval on a given project due to the failure of the project to comply with the requirements contained in the Administrative Code in Section 4-342B, which is generally the duties and responsibilities for the project inspector, and those are briefly summarized here, such as provide continuous inspection, maintaining their job file, and there's a lot of elements that must be contained within the job file that are outlined, that are specifically identified in in Section 4-342B. The proper preparation of semi-monthly reports, notification to DSA at certain stages or triggering events, issuing deviation notices when necessary for construction that is deviating from the approved construction documents, preparation of verified reports, and performance of the duties with honesty. In Section 4-333.1, significant changes were made to the project inspector certification prerequisites. This includes work experience, education, and certification. These new requirements were implemented beginning with the March 2019 exam administration. There were many more pre-qualification options added for each inspector certification exam to recognize appropriate qualifying experience, such as those that can be gained in various construction trades, as well as to recognize education that may have been received through colleges or universities in areas related to inspections, and also to improve alignment with other agencies such as OSHPD. While the Class 4 Project Inspector exam is no longer offered, we still recognize that as a valid inspector certification. You can refer to the DSA Project Inspector Examination Information and Application package on DSA's website for further information. Regarding structural tests and special inspections in 4-335F4, so special inspectors shall prepare daily detailed reports and shall forward a copy of the report to the project inspector within 1 day, the day the inspections were performed. And those same reports need to be submitted within 7 days to the school district, design professionals, contractor, and you as the project inspector. And the special inspector's reporting must comply with the content and protocol requirements that have been identified in IR 1712, which is relatively new. And that provides more detailed information about the detailed daily inspection reports provided by special inspectors based upon the work they perform in their discipline. Regarding verified reports, there's been no changes here compared to the previous codes. In 4-336A, the following are required to submit verified reports to us and as you are likely familiar with, those are to be uploaded to DSAbox, and a copy is to be provided to you, the inspector. So it's the design professional responsible charge. They provide the 6AE, as do design professionals that have been delegated responsibility, the contractor, the laboratory of record, the district employed special inspectors. These are those that are independently and directly employed by the school district, and the geotechnical engineer. These are the same forms that have been required for several years now, and there's been no changes. 4-338, regarding addenda and construction changes. So addenda are changes that are made during the bidding phase and prior to letting of a construction contract, and that's noted in the code section specified 4-338B. And any changes that affect the structural, fire and life safety, or accessibility portions of the work must be submitted to us for review and approval as a construction change document, and this is noted in section 4-338C. The form DSA 140 is the one to use for submittal of post-approval documents. That form has been revised such that it can be used not only for CCDs, but also for any post-approval documents. This is any post-approval document after the project plans and specifications have been approved. So the 140 will be used for deferred submittals as well as addenda. So this is a bit of a change compared to the recent past use for the 140. Additionally, the method by which DSA is processing CCDs, given that we are now in the electronic plan review era, we have been using that to process CCDs. What you may find as inspectors that this limits some of your reviewing ability of the CCD during the back and forth process that sometimes occurs between design professionals and DSA, but the end result is the same. The final approved CCD will still be uploaded to DSAbox as it has been in the past. DSA may still require other CCDs, such as those in other disciplines, such as mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, such that then we can concur with the design professional that they do not contain any changes that affect structural, fire life safety, or access portions of the work. Regarding project inspector duties, 4-342B1 talks about continuous inspection, which was previously mentioned earlier on in this slideshow. So the project inspector must have actual personal knowledge obtained by personal and continuous inspection of the work of construction in all stages of its progress, that the requirements of the approved plans and specifications are being completely executed. And all means all, not just structural, fire, life safety, or access, but all. That includes mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and so on. This also entails verification of all the materials are being provided as specified, and that there is compliance with that, and also verification that special inspectors possess the valid certifications for the work that they are inspecting. In a sense, you as the project inspector are acting as a second pair of eyes to the lab manager for this requirement. Because recall, you are relying on those special inspectors to verify that the construction is in compliance with the approved documents for that particular specialty for which the special inspector is being provided. Continuing on with the continuous inspection requirements and the project inspector duties, you are to monitor the work of special inspectors for both on-site and off-site work, as well as the testing laboratory. You're also to be supervising any assistant inspectors that may be on a given project, and assistants must have on-site supervision by you as the project inspector for a given project. You can refer to DSA Procedure PR 1301, pages 2 and 3 for additional information related to these topics. Continuing on with project inspector duties, 4-342B2, with regards to relations with design professionals, any uncertainties in the inspector's comprehension of the plans and specifications or inconsistencies or seeming errors in the approved construction documents shall be reported promptly to the design professional for interpretation and instructions. So we have a practical approach with regards to that previous slide, and that's outlined here in this sort of quote-unquote chain of command for you as the project inspector. So if you do find anything that you have questions or uncertainties about, take it up with a design professional such that they can provide some direction or clarification regarding those particular issues you've identified. It could be that we, DSA, have approved some type of alternative means and methods that still meets the intent of the building code. We do not want you to issue deviation notices for code concerns not shown on the approved construction documents. Deviations would be issued on Form DSA 154, and that's only for construction issues shown on the DSA approved construction documents. You as a project inspector cannot compel a CCD submission. Continuing on with this chain of command approach, if you're not fond of the response you've received from the design professionals, you can certainly elevate to the DSA representative or field engineer if needed. And if the field engineer is in agreement with your assessment of the situation, then we as DSA can compel a CCD submission through a field trip note or other directive as the field engineer deems appropriate. And if it is determined that a CCD is required, then that must be reviewed and approved by DSA prior to commencing the construction that's associated with those areas. With regards to the project inspector's job file covered in sections 4-342B, items 3, 6, and 7, there's also additional information in IRA 8, and that IR is updated occasionally, and you can check our website for the latest version. The project inspector's job file must include the following elements. They need to include the Form DSA 152, which many of you are aware of as the project inspection card. You must also have the DSA approved plans and specifications. That's the DSA approved construction documents. The DSA approved Form DSA 103, that's the listing of required structural tests and special inspections. That's of most use, of course, to labs so that they understand what their scope of work will be for a given project. But it is also helpful for you as a project inspector as you're coordinating the tests and special inspections with which the lab will be involved in your project, and that you rely upon them for providing those services such that you can complete your verified report, your DSA 6 PI, as well as the 152. Deferred submittals are also to be included in the job file as required by the DSA approved construction documents. Continuing on with the job file elements, any addenda and revisions, construction change documents, and a log of those construction change documents. Test inspection reports provided by the labs and special inspectors. Any contractor submittals such as the construction schedule, shop drawings, material certs, product labels, concrete trip tickets, and so on, as required by the DSA approved construction documents, usually seen in the specifications. And a communication log that includes all communications and project-related meeting minutes and notes, and these would be significant communications associated with the project. And those are described in the relevant code section noted in a previous slide. Continuing on with the project inspector job file, notice of deviations that would be used, or that would be identified on Form DSA 154. As delivered to us, DSA, the architect and the contractor, with a log listing all notices with resolution status. Notices of resolution of deviations. Recall that you use the same Form DSA 154 to not only identify the deviation but also the resolution of that deviation, and you do not sign it until it is resolved. Evidence of continuous inspection that you've provided as an inspector, such as inspector daily reports for your inspections as a project inspector. The special inspection reports, their dailies. Records of concrete placing operations, and records of welding operations. This last one will often be provided by the welding special inspector should you have that on your project. Continuing on with the project inspector job file, records of pile driving operations. This will often be provided by the geotechnical engineer or a representative from the geotechnical firm or the testing lab that's involved with the project. Verified reports from all parties that are required to provide such. Completed semi-monthly reports, that's on the form DSA 155. That's the required form for your semi-monthly reports. Any DSA field trip notes, that's form DSA 135 or comparable. The applicable codes and reference standards, and any other documents required to provide a complete record of the construction project on which you're working. Continuing on with the job file. The job file must remain on-site and be made available to DSA upon request and shall be made part of the permanent school records upon project completion. We do recognize that many project inspectors do have access to computers and may be storing their job file elements within their computers, and which is acceptable provided that people have access to that should they need to have that. So keep that in mind with regards to where you're keeping your job files and who has access to those. There's more information provided about this topic in PR 1301. Regarding notifications to DSA in section 4-342B5, notices to the field engineer must be made by email for the following. However, as many of you are aware, we are using DSAbox to fulfill this notification requirement. You would use form DSA 151 to do so. And these are the triggering events for which you would provide DSA with the 151. Start of construction, or if it has been suspended, if on a suspended project it is restarted. 48 hours prior to foundation trench completion. 48 hours before first concrete, or if you have a project with masonry, then before grout placement. And when requested by DSA, 24 hours before subsequent significant concrete or grout for masonry placement. The reason that we have that qualifier for the when requested by DSA, as far as 24 hours before subsequent ones, is if you're working on a concrete parking garage or a gymnasium building with masonry for the walls, according to the previous language and earlier versions of the administrative code, you would be notifying DSA nearly daily. And we wanted to get away from that annoyance and given the nature of that construction, so it's only going to be when specifically requested for DSA 24 hours before those subsequent significant placements. You can discuss this situation with the field engineer for your project if you're wondering what frequency he would like you to use for your project. The other triggering event identified here is whenever work is suspended for at least 1 month. Regarding performance of project inspector duties as identified in the Administrative Code, section 4-342B8, inspectors shall perform all the duties that have been identified with honesty, and engaging in any illegal activity or failure to perform in an ethical manner may be cause for us, DSA, to take disciplinary action. Continuing on along these lines regarding violations in 4-342C, DSA may take disciplinary action if an inspector has any of the following: fails to fulfill code responsibilities, is convicted of a crime related to the qualifications, functions, or duties as a project inspector, if the state architect receives a factual complaint. Should that occur, then section 4-342D regarding disciplinary actions identifies what is available to DSA. And as you skim down this list here from 1 through 6, you'll notice that there's an increase in severity. However, DSA can jump to any one we deem appropriate based upon the scenario for that project. So with the first one, meet in the DSA regional office for counseling. Number 2, attend training classes. Number 3, withdrawal of project approval. Number 4, downgrading of certification. Number 5, suspension of certification. And number 6, withdrawal of certification. The last one being the most severe. We have been involved from time to time with inspectors who have not fulfilled their obligations, and we have gone through some or many of these items based upon that particular situation. DSA does not like being the bad guy, but we are prepared to do so if it's appropriate. Continuing on, related to this topic, in 4-342, subsections E through G, it provides further information about procedures for disciplinary action, notices, appeals, and the criteria for reinstatement. There's been no changes here with regards to project inspector performance evaluations. These are the same forms that have been used now for several years, the DSA 119 and 180. As you know, Form DSA 119 is used for the project inspector performance review. It's used on each visit or as needed, and it is factually based, not based upon opinion, in the sense of does the project inspector have this information, yes or no. And this is posted in box, as are the field engineer's trip notes and other documents that need to be submitted to DSA for a given project. Form DSA 180 is essentially a summary of all of the 119s on a given project associated with that project inspector. It is a performance record of the project inspector, and it is available for public viewing as well in Project Inspector Performance Review box. Regarding our PR 1301, which provides the construction oversight procedure, this is occasionally updated, and it provides the required and prescribed method for compliance with the Title 24 regulations that are related to communicating and documenting the status of construction, inspection, and material testing for a given project within DSA's jurisdiction. It is applicable for project inspectors as well as design professionals, testing personnel, special inspectors, the school district, contractor, and so on, as well as DSA. It lists the duties that are applicable for the parties mentioned, and it also provides background information related to the use of the project inspection card, which is referred to as Form DSA 152, as well as many other forms associated with this construction oversight process. Regarding the inspection card, the project inspector is the one who completes this to report on the status of compliant construction to be in compliance with Title 24, Part 1, Section 4-336A. It serves as an interim verified report. Inspectors can refer to and make use of PR 1301 to understand the requirements associated with it, as do other parties that are required to provide verified reports that are a documentation requirement that would be recorded as being received by you, the project inspector, in the 152. There's also the DSA 152 manual, which provides further information about the inspection card and can serve as a reminder for some of the elements associated with ensuring compliant construction, such as the inspections, testing, and documentation. The first area of this form is input by DSA, and the remaining portion is completed by the project inspector. As you all are likely aware, the inspection card is the same one that is used on all projects, though they will be often separated there will be one provided for each individual building on a given project, as well as the site work. But because the same card is used in all of these different types of construction of these different structures, some items or blocks may be not applicable based upon a given project scope or a given building or site work condition for which it's being used. The overarching themes are well explained and summarized here. It's to help ensure that the necessary inspections occur prior to covering up the construction work, and it also ensures timely receipt of the required documentation associated with that construction work. With regards to project inspector duties associated with the inspection card, the project inspector needs to possess the inspection cards prior to construction beginning. They also need to make sure that they have the correct quantity of inspection cards on a given project, and notify DSA if the construction begins without the inspection cards being in your possession, or if you find that you do not have the correct number of cards, you're also to notify us. And you can refer to PR 1301 as well as the 152 manual to ensure that the necessary tests and inspections occur and that the documentation associated with those is received and are on the job file prior to approving, that is essentially signing off on each applicable block and section of the inspection card. Regarding continuing with your duties as the project inspector regarding signing off of the applicable blocks and sections in the inspection card, that's to occur when all of the following occur. First, when the completed work complies with the DSA approved construction documents. All necessary tests and inspections are complete. All relevant deviations from the DSA approved construction documents have been resolved. All of the relevant DSA field trip note issues are also resolved. This means you must be keeping track of the information identified by the DSA field engineer for the project, and that all of the necessary documents associated with the above items have been received by you as the project inspector. If any block or section is not applicable to the construction, then you shall enter not applicable for the date, but you still provide your initials. This means that your initials will be provided in every single block or row on the inspection card. Continuing on regarding your duties as the project inspector, so until you, the project inspector, has signed off on the applicable blocks and sections of the inspection card for a given structure, the contractor might be prohibited from proceeding with work that would be covering up the unapproved work. Any subsequent construction activities covering up the unapproved work could be subject to a stop work order from DSA or the district, and we have made use of those on projects when the need arises. Immediately notify the DSA regional office that's associated with that project if applicable inspection card blocks or sections have not been signed off and yet the contractor is proceeding with covering up that unapproved work. And if you also have missing verified reports as well, you can contact the field engineer or the regional office accordingly. IRA 13 has further information related to stop work orders and orders to comply. The project inspector reporting forms are noted here. These are sort of the 150 series with the exceptions of the first and last item. And these forms are due to the code requirements. You can take a look at the resources associated with this presentation for further examples of these forms. You can also see PR 1301, especially Section 2, that provides further information about the use of these forms noted here. These have been around for quite a while, so I won't be dwelling on these. You can see here with the DSA 5 PI, that's the PI qualification and approval. The DSA 151, that's the project inspector notifications, and we provided examples of the triggering situations earlier on in this presentation. The 152 inspection card, 152 IPI, this would be the inspection card that's applicable for in-plant inspection. It also serves as the verified report for the in-plant inspector and the design professional responsible for observing construction for in-plant work. There's the DSA 154, which is the notice of deviations and resolution of those same deviations. The 155 is the semi-monthly that you have been using for your semi-monthly reports as a project inspector. And the DSA 6 PI is the PI verified report. Regarding submitting the various required documents to DSA, we are now using DSAbox, and that we have been for several years now, to submit those. As a refresher, what is DSAbox? It's essentially a secure cloud-based collaborative solution that DSA has made use of from a third-party vendor to allow greater transparency and facilitate communication between DSA and those involved with the construction on a given project. DSAbox is required for active construction projects and has been for several years now. For those individuals or parties or entities that are required to provide DSA with certain documentation associated with the construction as it continues. As many of you are likely aware, DSA is very picky about the particular naming of documents that are submitted to DSAbox. And further information is provided in the External Users Training module in section 1.4. That's what EUTM is the abbreviation for. And the folder and file naming standards have been established by DSA, and an example of that from the noted External Users Training module section is provided here in this slide. Usually there's information associated with the particular DSA regional office number, the DSA application number, and other information to help identify which track or folder an entity is required to be submitting the document and the nature of the document itself. Keep in mind that sometimes a date would be associated with the file name and sometimes not, depending upon the nature of it. Section 1.4 of that External Users Training module provides more detailed information about the nature of naming for each of the files to be submitted to DSA.